Caitlin Clark surrounded by a bunch of fools. Kelly, Amber, Stephanie White, you guys are clowns. And luckily for you, Caitlin Clark is part of your clown show. Kelly Crossgolf calling Raven Johnson to let her know she's gonna get drafted, giggling like a bunch of little girls whose best friend just got to the playground. Ooh, I'm so happy you're here, hee hee hee. Disgusting. Stephanie White talking about what a win.
Something is seriously wrong in Indiana, and fans have had enough. This is not the usual online noise or social media complaints that fade after a few days. This is different. An expert just went public, called out the Indiana Fever front office directly, and said what millions of fans have been thinking, but nobody inside the organization has been willing to admit. Stephanie White and Amber Cox are making decisions that genuinely do not make sense when you look at what they have sitting right in front of them. One of the biggest stars the sport has ever seen, someone who fills arenas, drives ratings, and brings casual fans into women's basketball for the first time. And somehow, the people running this team keep making moves that look like they are working against that instead of building on it. So, what exactly is going on in Indiana right now? Before we get into all of it, I want to hear from you directly. Do you actually think the Indiana Fever front office knows what they are doing with Caitlin Clark? Because the decisions keep coming, the explanations keep getting longer, and the results keep raising more questions than answers, drop a comment right now. Type "build" if you think they are genuinely trying to build around her the right way. Or type "sabotage" if you think something much more damaging is happening here. And while you are down there, hit that subscribe button, because this story is nowhere near finished. Every week, there is something new coming out of Indiana that fans cannot believe, and we are going to be right here breaking it down every single time. Now, let's get into exactly what happened, who said what, and why this whole situation just got a lot harder to ignore.
Johnson is a winner. Oh, what'd she score? 5 points in the last 2 national championships game? Oh yeah, what a real winner. She was on a winning team. Is Nick Young a winner? Nick Young was on Golden State Warriors. Is Nick Young a winner? Do you get Nick Young because you want to bring a winning mentality to your franchise? No, you don't. The way they're raving about Ravens defense, you'd think this is Kawhi Leonard. You'd think this is Tony Allen, Bruce Bowen in the flesh, the way they talk about Raven Johnson's defense.
Let's start with the people making these decisions, because that context matters. Stephanie White is the head coach. Amber Cox is the general manager. Kelly Crossgarth is also in the front office picture. These are the 3 names that keep coming up every single time fans talk about what is going wrong in Indiana. And to be fair, none of these are people who just walked in off the street. They have experience. They have backgrounds in the sport. But experience alone does not explain away decisions that keep confusing everyone watching from the outside. The frustration started building long before this recent drama. Fans were already watching the moves coming out of Indiana and scratching their heads. But it was manageable at first. Every team goes through growing pains. Every front office makes a questionable call here and there. That is normal. What is not normal is when the same pattern keeps repeating itself, and the explanations keep getting harder to follow. What makes this situation unique is what this team has. Most franchises would do almost anything to be in Indiana's position right now. You have a player who transcends the sport. Someone who does not just attract basketball fans, but pulls in audiences who never watched a WNBA game before in their lives. That kind of asset is rare. That kind of opportunity does not come around often. And yet, from the outside looking in, it does not feel like the front office fully understands what they are sitting on. But that confusion is about to get much more specific. The moment that sent fans completely over the edge was not just the draft pick itself, it was the reaction to it. Raven Johnson gets selected, and what follows is what many fans described as one of the most tone-deaf moments they had seen from a front office in recent memory. The phone call to Johnson, the giggling, the excitement overflowing like they had just solved every problem the team had, and fans watching at home were sitting there genuinely confused. Nobody is saying Raven Johnson is a bad player. That is not the argument. But the way the front office reacted, you would think they had just drafted a generational talent who was going to completely transform the roster overnight. The praise was immediate and overwhelming. She is a winner. She brings a championship mentality. She is exactly what this team needs. Those were the kinds of things being said. But fans started doing the math. In the last 2 national championship games, reports suggest Johnson averaged around 5 points. Being surrounded by elite talent on a winning team is very different from being the reason that team wins. The Nick Young comparison that started circulating online actually makes a sharp point. Nick Young won a championship ring with the Golden State Warriors. That does not make him Steph Curry. Rings do not automatically transfer winning ability to a new environment. Context matters, and the front office celebrating like context did not exist made everything worse. But the celebration was just the beginning. If the draft reaction frustrated fans, what came next genuinely alarmed them. Talk began circulating about the possibility of moving Caitlin Clark into an off-ball role, not as a temporary adjustment, not as a situational lineup tweak, but as an actual strategic direction for how this team would operate. And that is where frustration turned into something closer to disbelief. Think about what that actually means. Caitlin Clark's entire value to this team is built around her ability to control the game from the point. Her vision, her playmaking, her pull-up range that forces defenses to guard her from almost anywhere on the floor. That is what makes her dangerous. That is what makes the offense function. You take that away, and you are not just changing her role. You are removing the engine from the car and wondering why it will not move. The proposed lineups that fans began discussing made it even more real. Raven Johnson running point, Ty Harris, Kelsey Mitchell, and Caitlin Clark potentially playing in a 4-position role. Maisha Hines-Allen also being factored into the mix. On paper, someone inside that building might look at that and see versatility. From the outside, fans look at that and see a system that does not trust its best player to do what she does best. And when your best player is also your biggest draw, that is not a versatility problem, that is a direction problem. And the language being used to explain it was making things even murkier. Every time Stephanie White steps in front of a microphone, fans brace themselves, not because she says anything outrageous, but because there is a consistent gap between what she describes and what people are actually watching. The language is always smooth. Balance, flexibility, multiple ball handlers, different looks depending on matchups, and none of that sounds bad in isolation. Those are reasonable things for any coach to want. The problem is what that language translates to on the court. When you pursue balance above everything else, you risk making everyone interchangeable. And when everyone is interchangeable, nobody is truly built up to dominate. That is the fear playing out in real time with Caitlin Clark. Fans are not watching and thinking the team needs less creativity in its approach. They are watching and thinking the team needs more clarity, fewer experiments, a simpler and more direct commitment to what already works. There is also something worth noticing in how these press conference answers keep landing. Every explanation seems designed to sound thoughtful without actually addressing the specific concern fans are raising. It creates a cycle where the more the front office talks, the more disconnected things feel. And that disconnection is not small. It is becoming the defining feature of how this organization communicates right now. Fans are not asking for perfect answers. They are asking for honest ones. And the difference between those two things is becoming more obvious every single week. But words are only part of the issue. Now, layer the contract situation on top of everything else, and the picture gets even more complicated. Significant money being committed to players, while at the same time the organization is discussing rest management, role changes, and lineup experimentation. On the surface, that might seem unrelated. But fans are connecting those dots quickly, and the question they keep landing on is a simple one. Who exactly is this team being built for? Because if the answer is Caitlin Clark, the decisions do not reflect that. The money flow, the roster construction, the system being put in place around her, none of it clearly communicates that she is the undeniable centerpiece that everything else revolves around. And that matters enormously, not just for her development or her stats, but for the message it sends, internally and externally, about what Indiana values. Compare that to what other franchises around the league are doing. Teams are identifying their stars, constructing clear roles around them, and making sure every addition either fits that vision or does not get added at all. It is not complicated basketball philosophy. It is basic organizational clarity. Indiana, by contrast, keeps adding pieces that raise more questions than they answer. And every time a new question appears without a clear answer, trust erodes a little more from fans, from analysts, and potentially from within the locker room itself. Because players notice when the plan around them does not feel like a real plan. And that is exactly when outside voices start to get louder. This is the part that changed everything. Fan frustration on social media is one thing. People have been vocal about Indiana's decisions for a while now, and front offices can usually wait that out. But when someone with actual credibility in the basketball world steps forward and publicly calls out the organization, that is a different level of pressure entirely. And that is exactly what just happened. The criticism was not soft. There was no diplomatic cushioning or careful hedging. The assessment was direct. What is happening in Indiana looks like mismanagement. It looks like a front office that is more interested in proving it is smarter than the obvious answer than actually pursuing that answer. And the obvious answer has always been the same. Build clearly and simply around your best player, and let everything else follow from that. Once that kind of public criticism lands from a credible source, it does not disappear. It spreads. Other analysts pick it up. Fans share it. Media outlets reference it. And suddenly, the conversation shifts from angry supporters venting online to a legitimate organizational concern being discussed at a broader level. That is a much harder thing to manage. And it also validates every fan who has been raising these concerns and feeling like they were not being heard, because now the concern has a louder voice attached to it. But there is one more layer to this that nobody wants to say directly, even though everyone is quietly thinking it. Here is the part of this conversation that feels most important. If this pattern continues and nothing meaningfully changes, the consequences are not going to stay contained to bad press and angry comments. Fans are beginning to wonder, and it is worth framing this carefully as speculation, whether a prolonged situation like this could eventually affect Caitlin Clark's relationship with the franchise itself. Players want to win. They want to play in systems that trust them. They want organizations that make decisions with clarity and purpose. When those things are missing, frustration builds quietly until it is not quiet anymore. That does not mean anything dramatic is imminent. There is still time to course correct. A strong start to the season can shift narratives quickly in sports. Good decisions made consistently over time rebuild trust that poor decisions have worn down. None of this is permanent if the organization chooses to respond the right way. But the window for that response is narrowing. Every week that passes with the same confusion, the same disconnected explanations, and the same questionable decisions makes the hill steeper. And the fans watching all of this are not going to quietly move on. They are invested, they care deeply, and they are paying very close attention to every single move this front office makes from this point forward. The pressure is real, the stakes are real. And what happens next in Indiana is going to matter far more than most people inside that building seem to realize right now. So here is where everything lands. The The Indiana Fever have one of the most valuable players in women's basketball history sitting on their roster right now. An expert just went public confirming what fans have been saying for months. The decisions do not add up. The explanations do not match what people are watching. And the pattern keeps repeating without any sign of real adjustment. That is not a small problem. That is an organizational identity crisis happening in plain sight. The question now is simple. Does the front office recognize what is at stake before it is too late? Or do they keep doubling down on a direction that is visibly not working? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. This conversation is just getting started, and I want to hear exactly where you stand on all of it. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next, because Indiana is far from done surprising people. Stay locked with my channel, Simply Explained, for further WNBA updates.